Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. You know, when James Levine died, a lot of you said, oh, you should do a talk on James Levine. And I did a talk about why I don't do obituaries. And some of you had also suggested that Universal should release a James Levine box and that there should be lots of boxes. We should put James Levine in a box. Well, James Levine is in several boxes. There are a bunch of them on RCA/Sony, BMG, whatever the heck that company's called now. There were his Mahler symphonies, his Schumann symphonies, his Brahms symphonies. He did his best work, probably as an orchestral conductor in his earlier days for that label. But he made a ton of recordings for Universal, tons and tons and tons of them, and nobody cared about most of them. Really, it's kind of extraordinary. And believe it or not, there was a James Levine box. Some of you actually mentioned it. So I thought we might as well talk about it. What the heck, right? Here it is. It's called The Art of James Levine. This was part of an Art of Artist X series that was issued by Universal Italy. You can always tell it comes from Italy because it has this little thing here on the back, you know, this little security code tag ID thingy here that Universal Italy does. And so this is, believe it or not, this is a big box. This is 23 CDs, although, of course, he did much, much more. You know, he had a very strange career, Levine, in some ways, because he operated from his base of power, if you want to call it that, at the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra. And the Metropolitan Opera was not a standard symphonic ensemble, which meant that most of his work was done as a guest conductor, trotting around the globe with orchestras that he had a certain relationship to. Those included the Berlin Philharmonic, the Vienna Philharmonic, the Chicago Symphony, sometimes the Staatskapelle Dresden. I mean, these are great, great orchestras, but they weren't his orchestras. Toward the end of his career at the Met, he started making orchestral recordings with the Met Orchestra, and some of them were very good because he turned that orchestra into one of the world's great orchestras. There's no question about any of these things, but that still made his profile somewhat unusual. He was really at his best in the opera house, and there's no question about that, but he did tons and tons of recordings of standard repertoire symphonic music, and that is what is in this box. So I just want to go through it, all 23 discs, so you can see what I mean. There are some things in here that are very, very good, and some things that are just forgettable, and a lot of it is really forgettable. All of it has a certain level of quality that, you know, he was a Zell disciple, so let's not kid ourselves. He was going to operate at a certain level of quality because anybody trained by George Zell would do that. But it's kind of interesting how he fits into the paradigm of the musician that Zell actually preferred. You know, Zell once said that if he had a choice between a conductor or an artist who had tremendous rapport with the orchestra and a magnetic personality and one who was extremely well prepared musically, who knew his stuff, who knew how to conduct, who how to communicate his intentions, but who may not have been so interesting in terms of his interpretive ideas or his personal magnetism, he would always go for the guy who was better prepared over the guy who was somehow characterful. And that's exactly what we hear in these performances. Exactly. It's describing Levine to a T. He was extremely musical, extremely well prepared, extremely competent as a guy on the podium. He got what he wanted, but was he magnetic? Was he characterful? Did he do things that made you sit up and take notice and remember a performance when it was over? No, not always, not a lot of the time, but let's go through this and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So disc number 1 starts with the Missa Solemnis with the Vienna Philharmonic. Now, Mrs. Solemnis, I mean, that is a big deal, isn't it? It really is. It's a piece that Zell did better than anyone in the universe. Leonard Bernstein did it very well. Otto Klemperer did it very well. Levine's is what you might expect. Neat, clean, tidy, but ultimately just okay. I mean, you don't come back to it for any particularly compelling reason. On disc 3, I mean, that covers the first 2 discs. You get the Eroica with the Met Orchestra and the Unfinished, Schubert's Unfinished. It's wonderful coupling. It's very full. The Eroica has a 16-plus minute funeral march, which is about, well, more minutes than it needs to be. Again, excellent playing. There's no question about the discipline, the accuracy, the correctness of the ensemble, but is it really compelling music making? No, it's not. It's good, sometimes very good. But does anybody want to listen to Levine and the Met Orchestra do the Eroica or Schubert's Unfinished? I don't think so. I mean, so many of these recordings were made during the heyday, the psychotic heyday of the record industry, when everybody was doing everything and tons of it, and they just got shoved out there. Do they deserve to be revalued? Possibly. Possibly. You can listen to these 23 discs and say, gee, what a good conductor Levine was. And he was. He was very good. Was he very memorable compared to everything else that's out there that you have the opportunity to buy and listen to? Not always. All right, what do we have next? Oh, Berg. This is the Berg 3 pieces, Webern 6 pieces, and Schoenberg 5 pieces with the Berlin Philharmonic. I reviewed this disc when it came out, and I remember being really excited because I knew that Levine would do a good job in this music with the Berlin Philharmonic. I think the Berlin Philharmonic had real problems with it. Actually, the recording was technically a mess. You could hear all of the edits. It was so annoying to listen to. It was one of those quasi-early digital things. And I just think it was very badly put together. And for that reason, the performances were distressingly unpleasant. Levine remade some of the Berg pieces for Sony with the Met Orchestra. And it's much, much, much better, because he was a wonderful conductor in this repertoire. But this particular outing with the Berlin Philharmonic wasn't his best work, wasn't their best work, and was not a good day for the engineers. Then we get the Berlioz Requiem. The Berlioz Requiem, I mean, you know, so many people founder on the shoals of the Berlioz Requiem. What a tough piece to bring off. It requires that epic charisma, that craziness that Levine just didn't have. And the best performances are Bernstein, Munch, you know, the characters, the wild guys, the guys who could be improvisational, who could make it sound as though they were composing the music on the spot. Levine was never one of those. This is a neat, clean Berlioz Requiem. Who cares? I sure as hell don't. You do get some good overtures, though. You get a very good Corsair, Benvenuto Cellini, and the Roman Carnival. Those are excellently done. You know, that was the kind of thing he would always do well, because it's the kind of music where you go in there and you just nail it with the orchestra. And he does. He does very well. Then we have the Symphony Fantastique coupled to the Royal Hunt and Storm from Les Troyens, again with the Berlin Philharmonic. Very good performances. Very good performances. But if you want to hear the Berlin Philharmonic do the Symphony Fantastique, you're going to get the last Carillon recording, because that's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And it has all of the personality and sonorous richness that Carillon brought to his recordings with the Berlin Philharmonic. James Levine was not the regular conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic. He did not have the opportunity to put his stamp on that orchestra. And so, again, we have a very well-played Berlin Philharmonic, and Levine was a master at Les Troyens, a very nice Royal Hunt and Storm, but no one is going to choose this recording as their version of choice. Nobody! Nobody in the universe. I don't know anybody who ever heard of such a thing. Now we get his Brahms cycle with the Vienna Philharmonic. We get all of it? Yeah, we get all of it. Yes, we do. Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. One of the great Brahms cycles in the history of humanity. Levine was a great Brahms conductor. It suited him to a T, and he left us two great Brahms cycles. The Chicago Symphony one on RCA, and this one with the Vienna Philharmonic, which is moreover gloriously recorded. Absolutely fabulous. I mean, you're not going to want to get 23 CDs of other stuff you don't care about to get that Brahms cycle, but you should have his Brahms cycle. It's fantastic. For some reason, that music responded to the combination of discipline and passion that he brought to his conducting. It's just perfect for him. It really was. And a lot of people never noticed that, but my God, was he a good Brahms conductor. Then we get the Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony and the Sorcerer's Apprentice, again with the Berlin Philharmonic. Now, the Organ Symphony is very well done, not so fabulously recorded. The Sorcerer's Apprentice is terrible. It's really funny. Actually, when that recording was made, Levine gave an interview or a talk where he talked about the fact that the Berlin Philharmonic really had trouble playing the Sorcerer's Apprentice because it's a very, very difficult piece. Extremely difficult. It's rhythmically very, very tricky. And they had not played it. It wasn't in their blood. And Levine delivered a very strict, disciplined, accurate, fast performance that really had them on their toes, but has no personality at all. It sounds like they're counting as they're hanging on for dear life. It's really kind of funny. Funny to hear what happens when you have a technically very fine conductor and one of the world's great orchestras who have no basic rapport with each other, but who will behave professionally. And that's what you get. You get this clean, professional, neat, superficially exciting performance that completely lacks personality. That's really very interesting. Okay, Dvorak 8 and 9 with the Staatskapelle Dresden. I like these performances. I really do. They're exciting. They're very well played. They're beautiful performances. They were generally well received when they were initially issued. And again, there are a zillion Dvorak performances out there. Who is going to listen to Dvorak and say, James Levine. James Levine's the one for me. Oh, how I love James Levine doing Dvorak. Nobody does that. But they're good, and they deserve to be accredited as such. Haydn, The Creation. Ooh, The Creation. It's a really good creation. I remember this very well. Let's see, what else is in here? Part 3. Who's singing? Oh, yeah. Yes, with Kathleen Battle and Gustav Winberg and Kurt Mahl. I mean, great soloists. The Stockholm Radio Choir, which is wonderful, and the Stockholm Chamber Choir with the Berlin Philharmonic. Again, it's a fine performance. It's a very fine performance. It really is. I mean, Levine is a great accompanist. He's wonderful with voices and instruments. He has top-notch soloists. And I think this is a very underrated version of The Creation. I really do. It's very, very well done. Then we have the Planets, the Chicago Planets, powerhouse performance. Lots of people love it. It's not my favorite, but I mean, got to give it props. It's the Chicago Symphony and Levine, and they just go for it. So that's perfectly fine. Then we have Das Lied von der Erde with Jesse Norman and Siegfried Jerusalem with the Berlin Philharmonic. Something didn't go well with this. It really didn't. The singing is only so-so. The orchestra doesn't sound terribly involved. Levine it's just lacking that kind of world-weary expressionist passion that the piece has to have. You can't get away doing Das Lied von der Erde as a neat, clean, and technically correct version of anything. It has to grab you by the throat. And this one, no, your throat is fine when this is over. There's nothing happening to your throat after you listen to this, which is not a good thing. Mozart, Eine kleine Nachtmusik, the Posthorn Serenade, these are all of the Vienna Philharmonic. Levine was a terrific Mozart conductor. He really was. And he did the complete Mozart symphonies with the Vienna Philharmonic, which are none of which are in here, or a couple maybe. Are they? I don't know. Wait a minute. I'll tell you in a sec Mozart. Well, we're looking along. No, that's all you get from Mozart, because this is in alphabetical order, strict alphabetical order. And yeah, they're very, very good. Very good. Mozart responds very well to that classicizing element in Levine's conducting, that preference for clean textures and tight rhythms and propulsive tempos. It's very, very beautiful. And I love the post-horn serenade, don't you? I mean, isn't it just fun? It's a great piece. Let's see. Pictures in an Exhibition and The Rite of Spring. I like this disc. Well, you know, they're two blockbuster pieces with the Met Orchestra in top form, extremely well executed in music that doesn't require much more than being extremely well executed. And it is. It's an exciting record. And I like the coupling. The Rite of Spring and Pictures in an Exhibition kind of give you two sides of Russianness, the romantic side and the more modern, kooky side, and they work very well. So that's a good disc. Prokofiev, Classical Symphony and Fifth Symphony with the Chicago Symphony. A lot of you love Levine's Prokofiev Fifth. I don't particularly care for it. I think it's a little bit too heavy and a little bit murkily recorded, but I yield to those who appreciate it. It's an exciting performance, and of course it's the Chicago Symphony, so it has lots of brass. You can't say it's underpowered, let's put it that way. Schubert, Rosamunde, and the Schubert Ninth with the Chicago Symphony. Oh God, I hate this Schubert Ninth. Oh, I hate this performance. Oh, it's horrible. I think it's one of those performances where the longest movement, yes indeedy, the longest movement is the scherzo, because it takes all the repeats. I mean, that is such a mistake in this piece. My God, it makes the whole thing sound absolutely endless. I literally cannot stand this performance. I can't get through it. And I heard Levine conduct this piece live, and in concert, it worked better. Even with repeats, it worked better. But this performance is relentless and straitjacketed and interminable. Absolutely interminable. Schumann Symphonies, again with the Berlin Phil. Very good Schumann cycle. It is. He was a good Schumann conductor. I like his Philadelphia performances better, I must say, the RCA ones, but you can't argue that he didn't know what he was doing in Schumann, so that's okay. You know, you get, what is it, 1 and 4 in Manfred? Yeah, that's all right. Well, why not? Okay. There's so much good Schumann out there, though. So much. And there's also so much bad Schumann, but you know, Levine is reliable Schumann. He's always going to give you good Schumann. Let's see, Sibelius, Finlandia, Valse Triste, and the Second Symphony. A very underrated performance of the Second Symphony with the Berlin Philharmonic, once again. I just can't get past the fact that these Levine Berlin performances are just lacking in that last ounce of personality and characterfulness. He doesn't do anything interesting, let's say, unusual. And that doesn't mean you have to futz around with the music and do something bizarre or grotesque. You can always count on him to adopt sensible tempos and give you very good balances and sensible phrasing. And it's all good and musical. But it just doesn't bring you back to hear it again. Do you want to listen to it more than once or twice? Not usually. If you played the Sibelius Second and you didn't know who it was, if you were completely in the dark and you just listened to it cold, you'd say, gee, that's a really good Sibelius Second. You would. I mean, because it is. It's very, very good. But it's a one-off performance by a conductor who has no cachet in that repertoire, and I can't see anybody needing it. Is it necessary? That's the word. No, it's not. Strauss, Don Quixote and Death and Transfiguration. This is with the Met Orchestra, and this is the last thing in the disc, in the box. I never much cared for these performances either. I think that they're just, well, I keep coming back to it, don't I? Accurate, but not interesting. I mean, this is Strauss. There's got to be some glamour. There has to be some sort of excess, kookiness, wallowing in sentiment, something, instead of just neat, tidy execution. That's what we get here. Death and Transfiguration, it's such a piece of schlock. I mean, wow, but it's great schlock. I used to despise Death and Transfiguration. Now I love it because I think it's such a marvelous example of Straussian pseudo-profundity and pointless excess, but it's done so well, and you have to revel in that, like Karajan did. Karajan was the great pseudo-profound conductor. He conducted everything as though he were doing a philosophy treatise. It was always, but with such intensity and such conviction in just how important he was. And there are some pieces where that worked really well. In religious music, it tended to be horrible. But when Karajan got his hands on a piece of trash, remember trash? We talked about Tchaikovsky's trashy symphonic poem. Death and Transfiguration is trash, but it's good trash. And when Karajan got his hands on that, he could play it like it was the greatest piece of music in the world. Levine does not. He plays it like, okay, good music, and he's going to do a good job with it, and they're going to play it well, and they do, but it does not knock your socks off. And I want my socks to be 20 feet behind me by the time the death has transfigured. And as far as Don Quixote goes, well, it's a theme and variations, and those variations have to be a little bit loony. They have to be characterized. They have to have huge personality. And this sort of tight-lipped accuracy, it doesn't deliver Strauss. It does not deliver the essence of Strauss. And that, in a sense, folks, is the essence of Levine. One of the things that made him such a great operatic conductor was just that, his willingness or his ability to deliver first-rate, first-class accompaniments, to understand the overall arc of drama in Italian music, particularly in works that consist of small pieces all strung together. He could knit them together beautifully, and he was very considerate of his singers. He would allow them to stand in the spotlight when they needed to. He was a very, very good collaborator that way, and really just a fine, fine operatic conductor for that reason. But when you take these guys who specialize in that kind of conducting and you put them in front of an orchestra and say, wait a minute, the focus is on you now. It's just you. Do they always deliver? Well, Levine sometimes did and sometimes he didn't. At his best, he could do fabulous Stravinsky, that's in The Rite of Spring, the pictures in an exhibition. He was very good at these big romantic gushy things like the planets. He did terrific, fabulous Brahms. He did wonderful Mozart. These are all genuine strengths. But is there any reason for him to be one of those general all-purpose romantic music or late romantic music conductors who runs around the globe doing a little bit of everything? Was he the ultimate generalist? Was he a great personality in that respect? Like, for example, Leonard Bernstein or Charles Mackerras, or even, sort of conductors who approach that music from a modernist angle, Esa-Pekka Salonen. I mean, there are wonderful conductors out there who can do a general repertoire and put their personal stamp on it. And Levine was not one of them, probably because he never had an opportunity to record with his orchestra. By the time he actually got an orchestra, the Boston Symphony, he was ill and it was too late. And he'd slowed down terribly, and he was obviously in subpar form much of the time. So, the art of James Levine. What was the art of James Levine? I don't think you find all that much of it in this box. You're not going to want 23 discs of the merely good or okay James Levine. It might be in a complete box of everything he did, because it would have more of the Mozart and other things. You would have some more James Levine of extraordinary interest. But I don't find this very impressive, and I don't think you will either on the whole. And that's the sad fact. Sorry, guys. I don't think you need the art of James Levine. I really don't. His best work is elsewhere. His youthful recordings on RCA, his Mahler and Brahms and Schumann on those labels, and his Stravinsky. Great stuff. I would love to see a complete RCA box. That would be memorable. Truly, truly memorable. But this later stuff, It's hits and misses. And isn't that so often the story with all of these guys? Hits and misses. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me. Take care.